Please be seated. Well, you know, we monks and nuns, it's a very strict rule. We never drink, but I think standing up here and feeling your happiness is the closest we get to being drunk. So if I start slurring my words, it's your fault. But it's a wonderful joy to be with all of you, including all of those who are joining us online from all over the world. Well, we have a big subject and a very important one, isn't it? Inner security through divine connection. Because you look at the world today, and so much of what we see that's happening out there is very troubling. The wars, the divisiveness, the senseless acts of violence, in some parts of the world, famines. People can't get the food they need. And sometimes, perhaps it can feel a little overwhelming. Sometimes maybe you can have these fearful thoughts of where is the world going? Maybe a sense of helplessness. So the big question tonight, what can we do? What do we do? So that's the journey we're going to be taking tonight. You know, there's so much, if we look at our own guru, Paramahansa Yogananda's life, there's so much that we can learn from his example. Because when he was here in this world, it was terrible. Master knew about pandemics. And I think most of you know, when I call Paramahansa Yogananda Master, what that means is one who is a supreme master of yoga, the science of uniting the soul with spirit, one who's attained the highest self-mastery of self-realization. He knew about pandemics. When he was growing up in India, Asiatic cholera, this disease was sweeping through India. Hundreds of thousands of people died from it. When he was 8 years old, he got the disease. The doctors told the family it was helpless, but he was miraculously healed by the great Guru Lahiri Mahashai, responding to his mother's prayers. But then, just a few years after that, his own mother got the disease and she died from it. He was heartbroken, an 11-year-old boy. Then later, when he was 21 years old, World War I broke out in Europe. Millions died from that. He came to this country to spread the teachings of Kriya Yoga, and in 1929, what happened? The stock market crashed, the Great Depression. It was a terrible struggle for him just to pay expenses so he could feed the devotees in the ashram and keep the Mount Washington headquarters of his work going. Then, after that, World War II, and millions throughout the world died from the bombs and bullets, from disease, starvation. So when he was here, it was just one disaster after another globally. So now we're going to shift gears. I'm going to do an experiment with you all, okay? We're going to take a survey. So the first question I have for you, how many of you, whenever you think of our guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, you immediately think of World War I and World War II? Raise your hand if that's the case. I don't see any hands. Second question, how many of you, when you think of him, you immediately think of the stock market crash and the Great Depression? Please raise your hands. Okay, No hands. So the second part of the survey, how many of you, when you think of Paramahansa Yogananda, you immediately think of his love for God? Please raise your hands. Everyone. And final question, how many of you, when you think of our Guru, you immediately think of his love for you, for all us devotees, for all humanity? Please raise your hands. Everyone. Do you see the point I'm trying to make? Though our Guru lived during a time of great upheavals, many world calamities, how did he respond? How did he respond? Always, 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 he was centered in God. In the darkest of times, his life was radiant with joy, with spiritual power, with beauty, with the love of God. So the first point tonight, as with the Guru, so for each one of us here. Now, sure, our roles are different. We're not world teachers, but our purpose here is the same, essentially. It doesn't matter what the world is going through, and it doesn't matter what your world is going through. Whatever the challenge is, through these teachings, God is calling you to live a life of beauty, a life of higher meaning and purpose, a life centered in peace, love, joy. The Master said, "Earth is not a playground made for pleasure. Life here is our term in school, and the lessons taught are those needed to help us rise above our mortal nature, destroy our defects, and free ourselves from our shackles so that we can reclaim our forgotten divinity." You know, when you're in school, it's not easy. It's hard work to complete all the assignments, to pass the tests, but through that hard work, you're accomplishing something worthwhile. And so it's good to remind ourselves, we have to. As the Master says, life here is our term in school. It's not supposed to be a playground. And the purpose, to rise above our limited mortal nature, destroy our defects, and reclaim our oneness with God. Guruji said, "The greatest of all methods for curing the worries, fears, and insecurities of life is to conquer the consciousness of human weakness and frailty by becoming united with God's omnipresence. When you know that God is with you, nothing can stand against you." One of our Guru's closest disciples, Sri Dayamata, she served as the president for Self-Realization Fellowship, Yogoda Satsanga Society, for over 50 years. And there was one wonderful story she told us once that I remember, where this was when Master lived with them in Encinitas at the Hermitage. And from time to time, Master would take a group of them, small group of devotees, and he would walk with them on the lawn outside the Hermitage there, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And so one of these times, as Dayamata tells it, as they were walking, she let herself fall behind the group of Master walking with the devotees, and she could see the footprints in the grass that Master was leaving as he walked. So very carefully, as she walked, she put her feet in the footprints of the Guru, and she was praying, "Lord, let me spend my whole life walking in the footsteps of my blessed Guru." And you know, that's exactly what she did. And that's how and why she became that beautiful, beautiful example of the perfect disciple. So, how do we walk in the footsteps of our Guru? Not easy, but very, very simple. What we do, we practice the teachings each day, sincerely, devotedly, enthusiastically, eagerly, to the best of our ability. This subject, inner security through divine connection. Whenever something in the world is troubling you, whenever there's some personal struggle you're going through, look to the teachings. There'll always be something there that is relevant to whatever you're facing, something you can apply that will help you. His teachings cover all life. Everything you ever will need is in there. We have the Kriya Yoga techniques of meditation, highest science of communing with God. We have the affirmations, the how to live teachings, how to develop a loving relationship with God. And the more we practice the teachings, the less we identify with this limited physical body and the outer world, and the more we are connected and grounded and anchored in the divine consciousness of the soul. It's as simple as that. In the Upanishads of India, it says, if thou canst transcend the body and perceive thyself as spirit, thou shalt be eternally blissful, free from all pain. There was a devotee, I met her many, many years ago at Convocation. Very humble, simple woman. She lived in Spain, attended one of the meditation groups there. And after I met her, she learned she had cancer. And so at one point she wrote to us, and I want to read a little bit from her letter. She said, "The cancer has spread, and the doctors tell me that no therapy can be used. Since I understood this, a great peace has never left me. I don't fear death. Why should I? I remember that I used to fear losing the consciousness of Master's presence at death, and that was unbearable. Now, I know it can't be so, as my love for him will be the only passport I will use with a big stamp on it, my deep longing to know God. I know death doesn't exist because I don't identify myself with the physical body." You see, she did the spiritual work. She was faithful in her practice of Kriya Yoga, meditation. She wasn't perfect, but she tried consistently through the years, and this was the result of such a life. Facing death, she was able to say truthfully, sincerely, I know death doesn't exist because I don't identify myself with the physical body. The devotees who took care of her in those final days, they told us it was just so inspiring. They never heard her complain. They said on really bad days when there was a lot of pain and discomfort, what she would tell them, today I feel a little less well. Beautiful, isn't it? And on the last day, they were reading to her Master's poems. She especially liked the poem Samadhi. And when she stopped breathing and made that transition, they said, there was no sadness. On the contrary, there was a feeling of great joy. The soul of our friend was leaving her worn-out cage to freely fly in the wings of spirit. A feeling of great joy. A simple, humble, sincere devotee who was faithful in practicing the teachings And this was the result of her life. Now, of course, we don't need to wait, for some big crisis like a life-threatening illness to realize the benefits of following these teachings. And if you're looking for it, if you're aware, the blessings come each day, sometimes dramatic, sometimes more subtle. So I'll tell you about one of my very early blessings that I experienced when I was following this path. And to give a little background, so when I was very young, probably about 2 years old, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Now, it turns out that wasn't the case. The doctor was mistaken, but it is true that physically I was very, very uncoordinated, clumsy. And that continued as I grew. And so, for example, at school, when the kids would choose teams for sports, like basketball, baseball, football, I was one of the few they always chose at the very end because I wasn't very good. Now, in my mid-20s, I started with these teachings, taking the self-realization fellowship lessons. And especially when I started meditating, oh my goodness, I just felt so different. And I know many of you have had that experience too. I just felt like every cell in my body had been transformed. It just went that deep. And at some point, I moved to this place, and up the street was a basketball court. And when I saw that, I just had this really strong thought, and more than that, feeling, I can play basketball now. I can dribble and make jump shots and do all these things that were difficult for me before. But whenever I went by the basketball court, I was busy, had things to do. But finally the day arrived. I got a hold of a basketball, and I went out there. No one was around, and I started playing by myself. So can you guess what happened? I was terrible. Really bad. It wasn't that I couldn't make the basket, it was worse. I couldn't even hit the rim of the basket. In fact, the first few times, I couldn't even hit the big backboard behind the basket. I was awful. I hadn't played for years. So that was the day I learned, no, meditation isn't going to automatically make you a good basketball player. If you want to be good at it, you have to practice. And realistically, for me, I think we'd be talking about 3 to 4 lifetimes. But there was something else that happened that day. And this is why I'm sharing this whole thing with you, okay? It was very, very interesting. As I was running around on that basketball court, chasing after that ball, there was another part of me that was watching this whole thing. And that inner me was so happy. I couldn't believe how happy I was. Filled with peace. Filled with joy. Isn't that interesting? Now, sure, through the practice, as we apply ourselves to the practicing the teachings, what happens? We develop our concentration, our willpower, our discrimination, our intuition, and all this will certainly help us to be more successful in our outer lives. There's no question about that. But still, for every one of us, there's those times when you just can't make the ball go in the basket. Meaning, there's some part of our lives, could be a very important relationship to us, could be career, health, going to school, And we're trying, and yet something just isn't working. Have you ever had that happen? Of course you have. We all have. We don't claim that when you start these teachings, your life is always going to be smooth and easy. Master never promised that because, as I said earlier, life here is our term in school. And school is filled with lessons, and school is filled with tests. It's not meant to be easy. It's training. But what our Guru does say, if you sincerely practice these teachings, no matter what, if you never give up in your search for God, you will know a peace, a happiness that endures. You will have a living connection with God that is a source of strength in all circumstances. But at times we do have to struggle for that. And so, for example, there may be times when it's harder for you to concentrate, harder for you to meditate. Sometimes maybe you may not feel the inner peace. And if that happens, so important, never let yourself give in to discouragement, and never, never, never think less of yourself as a devotee of God. This is natural. It's part of spiritual growth. It's learning to give our love to God without condition, making the effort regardless. Even saints go through this. I remember Dayama telling us, and this is in her new book, in Master's later years, more and more he put the responsibility of the work on her shoulders. And she didn't want it. She wanted to be a humble devotee, serving in the background. But more and more, Master insisted that she take on responsibilities. In his final years, she was the one responsible for running the organization for the most part. And she told us once, there were times when she would wake up in the middle of the night trembling with worry. Now you have to understand, this was one of our Guru's most advanced disciples. And this was after many years of deep, deep meditation, trembling with worry. So what would she do? In the middle of the night, she'd get on her knees before her little altar, and she would pray with all her heart. She would pray, surrendering her whole life to God's will, invoking God's blessings and guidance and strength. So, when you have your own struggles, remember, even saints have to go through it. What you do your best, and you keep doing your best, and you keep doing your best out of your love for God. That's your bedrock. That's your strength. That's your salvation. And I remember Dayama telling us that often it's during those difficult times, if the devotee refuses to give up and keeps calling on God, often it's precisely at those times that the devotee makes the greatest spiritual progress. Because we're proving to God our love doesn't waver. What did Swami Sri Yukteswar tell the students of his? Everything in future will improve if you are making a spiritual effort now. That's our daily mantra. That's our daily guidepost. What happens as we continue, we build a wonderful sanctuary within. That comes as we persevere with meditation, experiencing God within. We create that strong connection with Him. And that connection becomes the channel through which we receive God's love, God's strength, and blessings. And we also develop that sanctuary outside of meditation by the efforts to build that personal, loving, close relationship with God. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, taking shelter in me, all beings can achieve the supreme fulfillment. And as we meditate through the years and we practice devotion and we work on that personal relationship with God where you really feel He is with me, we begin to understand and experience what it means to take shelter in God. If you've ever been sailing on the open ocean, sometimes it can get kind of rough, the strong currents, the big waves, wind. But then you come around the breakwater and you enter the waters of the harbor, and there it's very calm, very peaceful. So there is a way we can live in this very turbulent, tumultuous world without being constantly thrown around. The shelter, that's when your mind is with God. And maybe you've had this experience, as I have had. You have some difficult situation that's troubling you, but then after some point, you put your mind on God. You pray asking for His help, or you use one of the Master's affirmations, and there's an instant response. There's calmness, there's peace. You feel better. And then you think, my goodness, why didn't I do this 3 hours ago? Or why didn't I do this 3 days ago? More and more, the thought of God and the presence of God that thought brings, it does become a shelter. It does. Greatest way to build that shelter, that protection from all the troubles, be faithful with your practice of the Kriya Yoga. We have to keep at it. We have to work at it faithfully each day. You see, we're tied to body consciousness because the life energy is flowing outward, down the spine and into the senses. And that's what keeps us so wrapped up in this outer world with the unending troubles. But when you practice the Kriya Yoga techniques, especially Kriya Yoga proper, what it does, it magnetizes the spine. And as that magnet in the spine becomes strong, it pulls the energy away from the senses, away from the muscles, into the spine and brain, into the higher centers of spiritual perception. And we begin to discover and experience that inner world of spirit. When Master would give the Kriya initiation, what he would tell the devotees, he would tell them, the key to heaven is in your hands. But then he would really emphasize, use it. Use it. You have to practice. There was a long-time devotee I knew. He passed away some years ago, and every year I would see him at convocation, and we'd always have a nice talk. I always enjoyed it. I distinctly remember the very last time I saw him. He was older. It was at convocation. He was frail, noticeably frail, but he had a wonderful spirit, and he was going around to all the monks and nuns, thanking us for everything. He was just so grateful for everything from A to Z. And as we were talking, I could feel such love and joy coming from him. And as he left me, I thought, my goodness, Master, Divine Mother have really lifted him to a very high state of consciousness. And just a few moments after that, one of the monks came to me and he said, have you talked with so-and-so? He's like a saint. Because that presence was there. Well, this devotee wrote to us at one point, and I want to read just a little bit from his letter. Here's what he said. I have practiced Kriya Yoga for 45 years. For more than 20 years, my meditations were dry, but I kept on with my twice daily practice. Now, in my later years, I am blessed beyond the ability of words to convey. Recently, in deep meditation, after practicing Kriya, I asked the Master, what is cosmic peace? There was silence. I went deeper in meditation, and gradually I felt a wave of blissful peace ascending from the lower spine upward toward the higher spinal centers and spreading all over the body. Perception of peace never known before. In this light of blissful peace, I felt the body was melting away, and my soul was ascending and expanding in waves of love. In ever deeper meditation, my soul entered an even higher level of blissful peace, a state of vibrationless, perfect, sweet tranquility, and I knew that for a brief instant, I was home. For 20 years, his meditations were dry, but he persisted, and then the blessings just poured upon him. So, daily meditation, that always has been, always will be the cornerstone, the foundation of this path of self-realization given to us by our guru. But also, we want to be connected with God when we're active, which is a big part of our lives. We want to be with God all the time. So how do you do it? How do you make your daily activity spiritual? Master used to tell this story. It's a traditional one from India, beautiful story, about when Krishna was a little boy and the gopis used to love to come each morning and they'd make special treats for him, little cheeses and things like that. Krishna was not only their prince, he was their guru. And it was their greatest joy to feed little Krishna, and he loved to eat the treats. Not just the food, but it was their devotion of these devotees. So one night it had been raining, and that morning the river was in flood, and they couldn't get to Krishna, who was on the other side. So they saw Vyasa, who is a great sage, writer of the Bhagavad Gita, and he was sitting by the river meditating, and so they went and sat around him, and he came out of his samadhi, and he said, well, what can I do for you? And they told him, well, Krishna is on the other side of the river, and we haven't been able to bring him his cheeses. Can you please tell us how to cross the river so we can feed Krishna? And Vyasa said, well, you always think about Krishna, but what about me? I'm hungry. If I don't get something to eat, I can't help you. Now, Vyasa was a great devotee of Krishna, so the gopis were shocked, that he would dare eat the master's food. But they didn't know what to do, so they let him have it, and he gorged himself, eating over half the cheese. And then he took them down to the river, and he said, "Oh, river, if I have not eaten anything, divide up and part." And presto, the river parted. Passage made by miracle. Gopis were totally confused. They said, here this fellow gorged himself in front of us, and then he tells the river, if I have not eaten anything, divide up and part, and the river obeys. But there was their opportunity, the passage made by miracle, so they hurried across, and when they found Krishna, he was fast asleep, and they woke him up, but he didn't seem real interested in cheese. And they were very perplexed because he always loved the cheese. And they said, but Master, aren't you interested? We have all these nice cheeses. Aren't you interested in cheeses today? And Krishna said, please, no more cheese. The other fellows sitting on the other side of the river fed me too much today. They didn't know when Vyasa was eating, he wasn't. He was offering it to Krishna. And the thing is, when Master would tell this beautiful story, the point he would really, really drive home, he would say, remember, whatever you do, give it to God. Whatever you do, give it to God. We can practice this when we sit each day for meditation. At the very beginning, don't think, give me, give me, give me. Put yourself in that devotional spirit. Lord, all I am, all I ever hope to be, I offer to you. I just want to love you. Try that. It will help. And after you practice the techniques, don't make it just techniques. We always should include, after the techniques, a period of communion. You sit in the stillness, but also from the spontaneity of your heart, let it flow. Your devotion, your love for God. And also, very important, when we leave our meditation seat, the devotion should continue. Whatever you do, give it to God. So how do we do that? How do we do that? Well, here's something Paramahansaji said. Remember, God loves you just as much as he loves Jesus. He loves you just as much as he loves the greatest masters who ever came on earth. You are the child of God. Be guided by his will. And then he says, if you try to please God in everything you do, you will live rightly. That's the key. That's the secret. You see, look, when you're in love with someone, you're always trying to make them happy. You're always trying to please them, isn't it? So that's it. Whenever you have a decision to make, think of God. Think of the Guru and tell them, look, I just want to make you happy. I want to please you. What would you have me do? Guide me. And when you're doing something, think, I'm doing this for you, my Lord, my beloved God. And at the end of the day, introspect and ask yourself, how did I do? And if you didn't do that great on that particular day, don't beat yourself up. That's not productive. But ask God to help you to do better. Make it personal. Make it personal. And as we keep on in this way, we meditate, we try to please God in everything we do. What you see is the sanctuary of God's presence becomes strong. A living sanctuary of peace. A portable heaven we take with us everywhere. Well, at the beginning of my talk, I mentioned some of the challenges that we see in the world. The wars, the violence, the diseases, pandemics. But you know, the beautiful thing here now, and this is something you need to remember, by meditating, by loving God, by practicing these teachings, you're not only helping yourself, you're helping to create a better world. This is very true. Master explains very clearly, when there's wars, diseases, natural disasters, this is simply a result of a vibratory imbalance in the world. Too many negative vibrations resulting from all the wrong thoughts and all the wrong actions throughout the world. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. There's billions and billions out there in the world. I'm only one. How can I possibly make a difference? But you do. And I'm going to show you right now. Okay? I better be good at this. Here's the thing. If you have a big room and it's dark, pitch black, and then in one corner of the room you have a little candle, and you light that candle, the light from that little candle, even though the candle is insignificant compared to the big room, the light from that candle radiates outward to all parts of the room. That little candle has the capacity to change the entire room to some extent. So this is what you have to remember. You are all the candles of God. The light of goodness, of love, of peace that radiates from one devotee who's deeply seeking God has a far-reaching impact. Our Guru said, "One moon gives more luster than all the stars. So a mooned soul, one who purely reflects the light of God, can influence the masses much more than the masses influence each other. Thus, individual effort can be even more important than mass karma. One who in every way tries to uplift himself, harmonizing body, mind, and soul with the divine, creates positive karma not only in his own life, but in his family, neighborhood, country, and world." One great way we can help the world is through prayer, you know? And Master said prayer after Kriya Yoga is very powerful. And so whenever you see something happening in the world that troubles you, what do? You pray for them. Just consider every trouble you see a call to prayer. A call to prayer. And also, through these teachings, we center ourselves in God's peace. But then we have a responsibility to share that peace with whoever crosses our path. And how do we do that? Not hard. Not hard. A smile, encouraging words, sympathy, listening, trying to pick them up in a little way, being caring, being kind. It's not hard. I think of Dayamata. She spent her whole life absorbed in love for God, but she was never cut off or indifferent to the world. She cared so deeply for all the devotees, for anyone who crossed her path, for the entire world. And Mrinalini Mata, who became president of SRF after Dayama, I remember her telling us, Dayama in her final days, she would tell those around her, she would say, tell them all, meaning all of us devotees, tell them all how much I love them. Again and again and again, she would say that. Tell them all how much I love them. That was the consciousness in which she left this world. Love for God, love for everyone. It was just a few days before our master left this world that he said to Dayama those famous words, "When I have left this world, only love can take my place. Be so drunk with the love of God night and day that you will know nothing else, and give that love to all." That is why we are here. That is our purpose. That is our mission. Love for God, give that love to all. And if you see a troubled world before you, all that means is your mission is ever more important. ever more important. So we have to do our part, huh? Well, should we have a little meditation? Let's see. So we're going to try something a little different. I want you all to open your eyes, just for a moment, and keep your eyes on me. And our guru says that just the simple act of lifting the gaze and focusing the gaze at the point between the eyebrows, that of itself is an effective practice of yoga. Because by doing it, keeping the eyes fixed in that position, it exerts a magnetic control, pulling the life force within, into the spine, into the brain, into the higher spiritual centers. So we're going to do this as a group. So you have to open your eyes now. You have to cooperate. And when I tell you, I'll give the cue, and together as a group, we're going to lift our gaze to the Christ center. And as we do that, feel the world vanishes. And you are in that inner realm of spirit. Okay, so are you ready? Okay, so let us now do it. Lift the gaze, focus the gaze at the Christ center. The world is gone. We are in that inner peace, that inner love, that inner joy of God. Just absorb yourself in that world of spirit. Now we will practice an affirmation together. And as we repeat these words of our Guru, feel not just with your mind, but feel with your heart, feel with your soul the spiritual power and truth and realization that emanates from these words from Guruji. So please repeat with me. I am not the body. I am invisible. I am joy. I am light. I am wisdom. I am love. I dwell in the dream body through which I am dreaming this earth life, but I am ever eternal spirit. I am not the body. I am invisible. I am joy. I am light. I am wisdom. I am love. I dwell in the dream body through which I am dreaming this earth life, but I am ever eternal spirit. I am ever eternal spirit. I am ever eternal spirit. Now let us pray for the world. Let us as a group visualize a great, powerful white light surrounding and permeating the world with powerful vibrations of peace and harmony and love. A great white light permeating the world with peace and harmony and love. And let us do one more affirmation. Please repeat with me. O fountain of love, make me feel that my heart is flooded by thine omnipresent love. O fountain of love, make me feel that my heart is flooded by thine omnipresent love. O fountain of love, make me feel that my heart is flooded by thine omnipresent love. Om Shanti, Shanti, Amen. May God bless us all. And thank you for having me.